Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Yogah Karmasu Kaushalam.
Hello everyone, hope you all are doing well. My name is Dr. Chetna Marwadi. I am working as an assistant professor at SD School of Commerce, Gujarat University, Ahmedabad. Today in this session, we are going to understand about an introduction to costing part 2 on the subject of cost accounting. The objectives of this module are: number 1, to understand the classification of cost; number 2, to understand elements of cost; number 3, to understand the installation and importance of cost accounting system; number 4, to know the role of cost accountant. After having familiarity with concept of cost in previous module, now we will study classification of cost. It is important to realize that the term cost has meaning in a given context. There are different costs for different purposes and no single cost concept is relevant in all situations. Here, an attempt is made to analyze cost and its behavioral aspect. The cost is characterized by the word sacrifice, and as such, it is very much in management's interest to control and reduce wherever possible the sacrifices involved in achieving desired result. The classification of cost is studied under the following categories. First category is classification based on financial nature of cost. Second category is element wise classification of cost. Third category is functional classification of cost. Fourth category is classification based on cost behavior. For clear understanding, cost may be classified into two categories: financial cost and non-financial cost under first classification based on financial nature of cost. Financial costs are cash cost or non-cash cost. So, cash costs are reflected in actual cash outflows. Business transactions usually involve both reward and revenue and sacrifice or cost, with the difference between the two being gain or profit. Thus, reward minus sacrifice is equal to gain when we are generally dealing with non-revenue transactions, and revenue minus cost is equal to profit when we are generally dealing with revenue transactions. Non-cash costs are the financial sacrifices that do not involve any kind of cash outflow. Non-financial costs are those costs that are not directly cash flow. They are not traceable through a company as cash flow. Such costs are, for example, low morale of employees, certainly involve sacrifices, and they may lead eventually in complex ways to reduce cash flow in future. They do not represent in immediate cash outlays. The above cost concepts are based on several factors like controllability, period, situation, input-output relationship, opportunity, urgency, historical, product, etc. The clear understanding of cost concept will help the management in analysis of cost, reporting, cost control, and decision making. Second classification is element wise classification of cost. The element of cost can be studied under the classification of direct and indirect cost. If the object of interest for identifying and measuring cost is to determine how much sacrifice is involved in manufacturing a particular product, then initially one can define the three elements of total cost as number 1 material, number 2 labor and number 3 expenses. All these costs may be direct or indirect costs. Direct costs are those costs which can be identified easily and charged with a unit of operation or costing unit or cost center. Cost of direct material, direct labor and direct expenses can be directly allocated or identified with particular cost center or cost unit and can be directly charged to such cost center or cost unit. These costs are also called traceable cost. Indirect cost or common cost. Indirect cost cannot be allotted but which can be apportioned to cost center or cost unit. These costs are also called as common cost. The indirect costs are not traceable to any plant, department and operation or to any individual final product. These overhead costs are indirect costs. Cost of indirect material, indirect labor and indirect expenses in aggregate constitute the overhead cost and are the indirect component of the total cost. Indirect cost cannot be directly allocated to cost unit or cost centers and have to be absorbed or recovered in cost unit and hence they are termed as indirect cost. The concept of direct and indirect cost are meaningless without identification of relevant cost of unit or center. Segregation of cost into direct and indirect cost is essential for proper accounting and control of cost and also for managerial decision making purpose. Third classification is functional classification of cost. Based on functions, the cost can be classified into production cost, administration cost, selling and distribution cost and research and development cost. Let's discuss each cost one by one. First, production or factory cost. The production cost is inclusive of all direct material, direct labor, direct expenses and manufacturing expenses. It refers to cost concerned with manufacturing activity which start with supply of material and ends with primary packing of product. Production cost is also known as factory cost where factory variable and factory fixed both costs are considered. Of course, it is based on inventory valuation policy of the company. If company has adopted variable costing system, only factory variable cost will be taken into account and in case of absorption costing, both factory variable and factory fixed cost are considered. Second cost is administration cost. The administration cost is incurred for carrying the administrative function of the organization, that is cost of policy formulation and its implementation to attain the objective of the organization. All kinds of office related expenses are recorded here like office rent, office staff salary, etc. Third cost is selling and distribution cost. The selling cost refers to the cost of selling function, that is the cost of activities related to create and stimulate the demand for company's product and to secure orders. The distribution cost will be incurred on goods made available to customers. These costs include cost of maintaining and creating demand for product, making goods available in the hands of customer. Fourth cost is research and development cost. The research cost is the cost of searching for new product, new manufacturing process, improvement of existing product, process or equipment, and the development cost is the cost of putting research result on commercial basis. Next classification is classification based on cost behavior. Depending on the variability behavior, cost can be classified into variable and fixed cost. Variable cost is a cost that tend to vary in accordance with level of activity with relevant range and within a given period of time. The prime product cost are direct material, direct labor and direct expenses which tend to vary in direct proportion to the level of activity. An increase in volume means a proportionate increase in total variable cost and a decrease in volume will lead to a proportionate decline in total variable cost. There is a linear relationship between volume and variable cost, but they are constant per unit. Variable costs have an explicit physical relationship with a selected measure of activity and exist an optimum cause effect relationship between the input and output. The fixed cost is a cost that tends to be unaffected by changes in level of activity during a given period of time. The fixed costs remain constant in total regardless of changes in volume up to a certain level of output. They are not affected by changes in volume of production. There is an inverse relationship between volume and fixed cost per unit. Fixed costs tend to remain constant for all levels of activity within a certain range. It follows that some fixed cost will continue to be incurred even when the activity comes down to nil. Some fixed costs are liable to change from one period to another. For example, salaries bill may go up because of annual increment or due to change in the pay rates and due to pay structure. Semi-variable cost or semi-fixed cost. Many costs fall between these two elements. They are called semi-variable cost or semi-fixed cost. They are neither perfectly variable nor absolutely fixed in relation to changes in volume. They change in same direction as volume but not in direct proportion thereto. An example is found in telephone charges. The rental element is fixed cost whereas charges for calls made are a variable cost. The distinction between fixed and variable cost is important in forecasting the effect of short run changes in volume upon cost and profit. This cost classification plays vital role for cost and price determination and for managerial decision. Now let us discuss the next point, that is elements of cost. In cost determination, different elements are having their role and significance. The appropriate knowledge of such elements or components makes cost determination decision very precise and accurate. There are three important elements which comprises total cost. These elements are material, labor and expenses. Each element can be direct or indirect. This can be described as material cost, direct material cost, indirect material cost. Labor cost may be direct labor cost, indirect labor cost. Expenses, it can be direct expenses, indirect expenses. Let us discuss all components of cost in their order. First, direct material. It is that cost which is easily identifiable for respective product. Material cost is generally becoming the part of finished product. For example, wood is direct material for furniture like table, chair, sofa, etc. Second, indirect material. These are those materials which are not easily identifiable for respective product. There are minor in importance. The cost of indirect material is low as compared to direct material cost, but they are part of finished product. Without this, cost finished product will not have shape as per design. For example, for furniture, nail, polishing, nuts and bolts are important indirect material. Third, direct labor. A very important expenses which is recorded in trading account of financial accounting is wages. Wages has vital role in determination of gross profit. Whatever wages are paid to workers for conversion of raw material into finished product is known as direct labor cost. These wages can be very easily identified with a particular product, job or process. Wages paid to the machine operator is direct labor. Fourth, indirect labor. Indirect labor is not directly engaged in the production process but only to assisting production process. For example, wages paid for repairing or maintenance is indirect wages. Fifth, direct expense. These are those expenses which specifically incurred for particular job or cost unit. For example, expense paid to furniture designer, cost of patent right, royalty payment, etc. are direct expenses. Sixth, indirect expenses. All indirect expenses other than indirect material and indirect labor are indirect expenses. All these expenses cannot be directly identified with a particular job or process, etc. Technically, the sum of direct material, direct labor and direct expenses is called prime cost, and the sum of indirect material, indirect labor and indirect expenses is called overhead. Further, these overheads are categorized into three categories. Number 1, production overhead. Number 2, office or administration overhead. Number 3, selling and distribution overhead. Overheads are categorized into three categories. Number 1, production or factory overhead. Number 2, office or administration overhead. And number 3, selling and distribution overhead. All these are further categorized into three forms. These can be in the form of indirect material cost, indirect labor cost and indirect expenses or cost. Now, we will see content of each overhead. First overhead is production or factory overhead. It may have indirect material like coal, oil, grease, cotton waste, etc. Indirect labor like salary of work manager, salary of inspectors and supervisors, etc. Indirect expenses like factory rent, depreciation of plant, repairs and maintenance of plant, insurance of factory building, etc. Second overhead is office or administration overhead. It may have indirect material like stationery expense for office, postage, etc. Indirect labor like salary of office staff, remuneration to directors, etc. And indirect expenses like rent of office building, legal expenses, office lighting and power, sundry office expenses, etc. Third overhead, that is selling and distribution overhead, may have indirect material like packing materials, goods given as sample, delivery van expenses, etc. Indirect labor like salary of sales managers, salary to sales department employees, salary of sales van driver, etc. And indirect expenses like advertising expenses, travelling expenses, showroom expenses, bad debts, insurance for goods in transit, etc. Now, let us discuss our next objective about installation of cost accounting system. The success of any concept is based on its organized implementation. Every system should have predetermined stages to make the system effective and result oriented. To get maximum benefits of cost accounting, the appropriate installation of costing system is desirable. Every business entity can develop its customized system. Before installation of system, several questions are to be answered and subsequently system should be developed. Questions like where, why, when, how are to be answered, and then the following steps should be followed. First step, the technical aspects of the business is to be understood. For example, the nature of product, process of the product, information about normal loss if any, nature of labor used in business unit, etc. Second step, the organization structure of the business should be studied to get information about authority and responsibility of each level and of different executives. Third step, material related information should be gathered. It means information about purchase, issue and recording methods of material should be acquired. Fourth step, the labor remuneration method to be evaluated and if required, suggestions for modification should be given. Fifth step, forms and accounting records should be so designed so as to involve the minimum clerical labor and expenditure. Sixth step, the size and layout of the factory should be studied. Seventh step, the developed system should be effective in cost control and cost reduction. Eighth step, the system should not be complex but should be simple and easy to understand. Ninth step, the system should be introduced gradually and should be evaluated at specific interval. Now let's discuss role of cost accountant. After having familiarity with cost accounting system, let's understand the role of cost accountant in business organization and prerequisites to perform his role. First, to know the nature of business unit, it means that whether it is manufacturing unit or a service providing unit. Next, to understand nature of product or services offered by business unit. Next, to acquire details about technology used by business unit. Next, to understand the proportion of material, labor and overheads in the total cost. Next, to understand the quality of material and labor to be used in production. Next, to know the different stages of process of product production or manufacturing. Next, to decide the process of cost determination. Next, to decide the selling price as per the strategy of management. Next, to minimize wastage with consultation of different departments. Next, to implement effective and efficient strategies for cost reduction and cost control. Next, to develop an appropriate base for allocation of overhead amongst different department or process or section, etc. Next, to see effective implementation of cost audit system if applicable to the business unit. Next, to follow the guidelines and regulations prescribed by respective competent authority, and last, to prepare managerial report. Now let's summarize this module. In this module, we have got familiarity about cost classification, which is important from the viewpoint of decision making. This classification is very useful to determine precise cost of a product or service. This classification helps to implement effective and efficient cost reduction and cost control tasks. We have also discussed the elements of cost in detail. We discussed the role of cost accountant, which is desirable, and it is explained in detail here. The success of cost accounting is based on installation of appropriate costing system, which is also discussed here in detail. I am sure that these modules will clarify your specific issues in cost accounting, and you will be in a position to understand subsequent chapters of cost accounting in a better way. In the module 3, we will study about one of the elements of cost, that is about material. Thank you all. Thank you for watching this entire video. Thank you.